Millionaire MOCKS janitor's opinion on his project, but the incredible truth was revealed. Jack stood in a lavishly decorated hall, surrounded by the shimmering elegance of the gala. His janitor's uniform felt like a heavy chain, binding him in a world where his voice was little more than a whisper against the clinking of glasses and the laughter of the elite. He wiped his clammy hands on his trousers, taking a moment to steady his breathing as he watched Victor stride through the crowd, losing confidence in a tailored suit. It was hard not to feel small next to such wealth, yet Jack's heart beat with a mix of unease and defiance. The project Victor had funded was supposed to elevate campus life, yet all Jack could see were the students passing by, their faces masked with indifference, as if their involvement was more of a footnote than a priority. A pang of frustration gripped him. Why was no one asking the very people who would inhabit this shiny new building what they thought? He swallowed hard, recalling Victor's dismissive laugh when they exchanged words earlier. "What do you know?" he said, as if dismissing a child's dream. Rage boiled beneath Jack's calm exterior. Did hard work and honest observation count for nothing here? He hesitated, staring down at the polished floor, wondering if his voice could cut through the din of elegance and entitlement surrounding him. But he was tired of standing silent, tired of feeling irrelevant. Something was at stake, and witnessing this celebration felt like a betrayal to those students he swept and mopped after hours. Those students mattered. They deserved more. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The air pressed on him as if the elegant gold fixtures were closing in. Jack's thoughts raced. How could he confront such a towering figure? What if he failed? The stakes felt insurmountable, his gut churned, torn between the desire to speak up and the fear of being crushed. The laughter of the elite rang in his ears, every chuckle a reminder of his place. Yet within that stormy sea of doubt lay a flickering ember of resolve. He couldn't let one man's arrogance dictate the future for so many. He looked over and spotted Emma, a student he'd seen in the library, debating passionately about student rights. Their eyes met, and for a moment, they silently understood. They would join forces. She would know what to say, how to articulate the fears and frustrations that swirled within him. But as he moved toward her, every step felt heavier, like an anchor tethering him to the very silence he hated. What would he lose by standing up? A fragile hope was won over by a paralyzing fear. Jack's breathing grew irregular. Would he be brave enough to find his voice when it truly mattered? Tension clung to the air, and Jack knew that every moment he lingered on the outskirts only deepened the rift between him and the opportunity to change the narrative. The clock ticked on, urging him forward. But would they listen? Or would he be just another ghost in a room full of shadows? The weight of uncertainty loomed larger than ever before, leaving Jack at the edge of a daunting precipice, a question burning deep within him. Could he find the courage to speak up and break through the walls of indifference? Jack hesitated, caught between the shimmering distractions of ambition and the cold reality of his position. Every step toward Emma felt monumental, as if the ground beneath his feet was shifting with the weight of his fears and aspirations. What if he fumbled his words? What if Victor laughed again? Yet somewhere deep in his gut, a burning desire to be heard sparked a flicker of determination. With every heartbeat, he felt the walls of the hall constrict, screaming for a change that could only come from within. The moment he approached Emma, he sensed a shift. Her gaze met his with a spark of understanding, bypassing the noise around them and anchoring him to purpose. An unwavering confidence surrounded her as she spoke. Jack marveled at her ability to articulate the thoughts that swirled chaotically in his mind. It wasn't just about him, it was about all of them, the voices that should have taken precedence in the ongoing dialogue about the project. "Jack!" she exclaimed, her smile brightening the undercurrent of tension. "I was just discussing how crucial student input is for the new building. We need to voice our opinions before it's too late. Yes, Jack blurted out, the words tumbling from his lips, igniting his courage. There's so much missing from this whole initiative. It's like they're constructing a building but forgetting the people inside it. They need to listen to us. As he spoke, Jack grasped the gravity of his thoughts, the realization that this was just a fleeting moment at a gala but rather the inception of a personal revolution. Emma nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. Exactly. We could organize a meeting, maybe gather student feedback through a survey. The scent of polished wood and expensive cologne seemed to fade into the background. Jack found himself buoyed by Emma's enthusiasm, and for the first time, he could feel the onset of a newfound identity forming from this engagement. The janitor's uniform he wore began to fade like an old skin, revealing something more potent beneath a man with ideas, concerns, and the right to a voice. Think of what we can accomplish together, he urged, his voice gaining strength. If we can convince the administration to hear us now, we can change that whole project. As the excitement flowed between them, Jack felt the earlier heaviness lift. An awakening began to unfurl from within, sparked by a shared purpose. He had spent years observing students' lives from the periphery, but now he sensed the possibility of being at the heart of transformative change. Jack's confidence had been timid, yet it was slowly evolving into something vibrant and compelling, but even as he embraced this shift, a weighty thought lurked in the corners of his mind. What would Victor do when he confronted the loud chorus of dissent? Jack's brief interaction with the millionaire echoed ominously. Victor was an authoritative figure unaccustomed to challenge. Jack, we should do this, Emma said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. We need to make noise. But we'll need a plan. Are you ready to stand with me when it gets tough? He nodded vigorously. The path ahead was fraught with challenges, each step potentially powerful, yet unforgiving. The fire within him ignited, fueled by resolve. I'll do whatever it takes, he replied, eyes gleaming with conviction. Every heartbeat surged against the walls of indifference that had long surrounded him. Let us make this happen. With that declaration, they began to brainstorm ideas, setting in motion a course of action that could flip the status quo on its head. But as they crafted their approach, Jack's mind churned with questions. Would they really succeed in swaying the administration? What would they face when standing up against Victor's influence? The interplay between hope and fear thickened as Jack realized that the true battle wasn't just outside, it was within him, where the stakes were greater than his own voice. Would he be able to navigate the throes of this awakening and withstand the pressure that lay ahead? In that moment of fervor, Jack caught sight of Victor laughing with an entourage across the room. He felt the tension crackle in the air around them, setting the stage for what was to come. The fear began to twist into focus, leading to an unavoidable conclusion. He was about to challenge the man who represented all that had once silenced him. The question loomed, was he truly ready to face the confrontation that awaited him? The next day, Jack's mind buzzed with ideas. He endured the early morning chores, but the janitorial work felt lighter than it had ever been. Each time he swept the floor or cleaned a bathroom stall, it felt as if he were clearing away the remnants of his previous self, the self who merely observed the world without contributing to it. He pictured himself standing shoulder to shoulder with Emma, presenting their proposal, and enforced his resolve. As he scrubbed the tiles, the reflections of his thoughts melded with the mundane tasks. Questions lingered, each one sharper than the last. What specific points would sway the administration? How would Victor respond to their challenge? Instead of shying away from these difficult inquiries, Jack chose to embrace them. He envisioned every scenario where they could gain allies among the students and faculty and began drafting a strategy in his mind. During lunch, Jack met Emma in the small student lounge, the soft hum of chatter peppering the air. Seated with a notebook, each scrawl of his pen lifted his spirits. He practiced articulating his arguments in his head, each word ringing with clarity. We're not just asking to be heard, we're demanding a seat at the table, he whispered to himself over and over, subconsciously rehearsing their future discussions. Jack. Emma's voice cut through his thoughts like a beacon of light. Yes. He responded, sitting up straighter. What do you think about gathering feedback not just through a survey but with small group discussions? We can create a safe space for people to express their opinions. That's brilliant, he replied, adrenaline pumping through him. The thought of fostering an environment where his peers could freely share their views ignited a spark in him. He realized this wasn't merely about changing plans for a building, it was about reshaping perceptions of what students deserved. Brimming with enthusiasm, they launched into a discussion. Jack felt the dynamics shift. The more Emma spoke, the more he found himself contributing suggestions. They brainstormed ways to encourage reluctant students to participate and dissected potential avenues of how to present their findings to the administration, ensuring their voices would resonate in the expected corridors of power. Hours turned into minutes, and before long, Jack noted how moments that once felt overwhelming confronting Victor, rallying students seemed less daunting. His hesitance started to transform into determination, and as they mapped out their plan, the realization swept over him, he was capable of leading this change. Images of a supportive student body rallied around their cause danced through his mind. But amid this elevation, doubt crept in. Victor was an established figure, powerful and interconnected, defeat was not an option. Would the influential millionaire choose to dismiss their efforts as frivolous? Would he retaliate in a way that impacted Jack's chance for success? In the quiet moments before sleep, Jack analyzed these potential outcomes. He sat at his small desk, the faint flicker of a desk lamp illuminating the page ahead. Each stroke of his pen echoed the feverish pulse within him. He documented not only strategies but emotions, the fears, hopes, antidotes for doubt. With each passing day, the walls of his mind that had previously stood high with uncertainty began to crumble. Within this structure, he discovered vital truths about himself. He held the tenacity to confront obstacles, the intellect to navigate complex dynamics, and crucially, the courage to stand against giants like Victor. Restlessness began to simmer within him. The impending confrontation loomed on the horizon. Would confronting Victor mark the apex of Jack's transformation, or would it reveal an even deeper struggle within? As the night closed in on him, Jack felt a surge of anticipation. The moment had arrived when Jack would stand not just as a janitor, but as a voice demanding to be recognized. He prepared for the challenges waiting in the shadows, for the clash of perspectives he hoped to illuminate. The question that loomed now wasn't just about his readiness, it was about the truths that would emerge under the pressure of confrontation. Jack awoke to the hum of the alarm blaring through the thin walls of his small room. The morning felt charged, each second ticking away with an undeniable weight. Today wasn't just another day, it felt like the precursor to something monumental. He pulled on his worn work boots, the familiar routine of preparing for his janitorial job now laced with a heightened purpose. As he trudged through the hallways of the school, sweeping the floors, his heart raced. Every stroke of the broom seemed to echo the affirmations he had rehearsed 100 times in his head. They were no longer just thoughts, they were stepping stones leading him toward the confrontation with Victor. Envisioning their meeting infused him with a sense of empowerment, squeezing out the nagging doubt still languishing in the corners of his mind. By the time lunch rolled around, he had gathered his nerves, though they flickered like the flame of a candle caught in a gust of wind. In the small lounge, Emma was already waiting, her face brightening as he approached. She sensed the thrill of determination radiating from him. They began to strategize with renewed energy. "Let us ensure we guide the conversation," she suggested. "If we frame our discussions around the benefits for the students, we can sway even the toughest of critics." Jack nodded, impressed by her thoughtfulness. "That's key. If we can show how our proposals directly impact the student experience, it becomes harder to ignore us," he added, feeling the thrill surge through him as they bounced ideas off each other. The hours spent preparing were turning him inside out. He examined every angle through a lens of intent. What would the administration's objections be? How could he preemptively counter them? Jack recognized that they needed more than just passion, they required a well-laid plan solidified by data and real-life testimonials from their peers. But underneath that excitement lay an unsettling fear. What if Victor truly disregarded them, even belittled them? Later that afternoon, Armed with his notes and arguments, Jack made his way to the large conference room where the meeting would take place. He paced outside, allowing anxiety to prickle the back of his neck. Moments before stepping through the door, he closed his eyes and drew a deep breath, reminding himself of the stakes. This was just about him, it was the students' voices that mattered. As he entered the room, it felt infinitely larger than he had imagined. Victor was already seated, an air of nonchalance wafting from him, as if he held all the power in the room. Jack's resolve faltered for a fraction of a second at the sight of him, effortlessly confident and dressed in his bespoke suit, an emblem of authority. But Jack quickly suppressed that doubt. He had come too far to turn back now. "Mr. Thompson, I appreciate you making the time for us today," Jack began, his voice steady yet simmering with adrenaline. Victor merely waved a dismissive hand, seated comfortably at the head of the table. "What precisely do you believe warrants my attention?" Victor asked, arching an eyebrow, his tone hinting that he expected little more than a mundane conversation. The question stung, but Jack refused to shrink. "I believe our proposal addresses critical inadequacies students face daily," he responded, focusing on the words and purpose behind them instead of faltering under Victor's gaze. As Jack began outlining their findings, he became increasingly animated, the words spilling forth like water from a broken dam. He focused not just on the project at hand but on the students' experiences, the dreams, fears, and aspirations that often went unheard. Victor's demeanor shifted as Jack progressed through the presentation, though each hint of skepticism still loomed large. Jack could feel the pulse of anticipation in the room. This wasn't merely a proposal, it was a challenge to Victor's dismissive authority. The weight of each word crystallized the moment when he dared to pause, scanning Victor's expression for a flicker of recognition. Jack had stepped beyond the limitations he had once accepted. As he pursued the heart of the matter, he preempted Victor's belittlement with confident assertions, unearthing an unexpected sense of agency. "Is that all?" Victor finally interjected, his expression unreadable. An inner resolve gripped Jack, one steeped in the potential of self-discovery. "No, it's just the beginning. If we grasp this opportunity, we can change what it means to be a student here," he declared, words pouring from a deeper well of understanding. The tension in the room shifted as Jack realized that this confrontation could alter everything. While Victor seemed poised to laugh it off, there lay a glimmer of uncertainty in his gaze. Perhaps he hadn't anticipated such fervor. Jack's heart raced with the surge of unyielding energy. "Today, we lay the foundation not just for ourselves but for every student going forward. It's time for you to listen." Would this declaration compel Victor to take their bid seriously, or was Jack on the precipice of further alienation? The stakes had risen, and the next words that followed might seal their fate. As silence enveloped the conference room, Jack's pulse echoed in his ears. He held Victor's gaze, a mixture of defiance and vulnerability dancing behind his eyes. He was acutely aware that his words hung, precariously weighted, like an accusation, challenging the status quo. But the internal dialogue persisted, the question nagging, had he gone too far? Victor leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in contemplation. Jack's stomach twisted with anticipation, he could almost sense the gears turning in Victor's head. Each passing second heightened the stakes, reminding Jack that this battle wasn't just against a person but against a whole system of indifference that had long stifled progress. Victor broke into a sardonic smile, the type that froze the air around them. "You think your little concerns are going to sway me?" The room thickened with condescension. "You are aware that I have other things on my plate, right? I handle significant matters here." Jack inhaled sharply, the backhanded dismissal weighing on him. He felt a flicker of doubt at the edges of his consciousness, but he steeled himself. "With all due respect, sir," he began, his voice firmer, "the significance of this proposal extends far beyond your desk. We're talking about cultivating a supportive environment, transforming apathetic students into engaged learners." He pressed on, emboldened by the weight of responsibility he felt for those he advocated for. Victor's expression hardened. "And what makes you think I haven't considered this already? Your emotions guide me to allocate resources." Jack internally bristled at the dismissal. Every stereotype wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket, and yet, with every dismissal, Jack's resolve deepened. This was not just about the budget and resources, it was about fairness and opportunity for those beneath the hierarchies they created. Feeling the tension rise, Jack reverted to what he knew: that data mattered. Our peers have indicated a significant drop in student morale tied to the structural issues we've identified, he stated, pulling sheets of testimonials from his folder. As he handed them over, he felt the burst of adrenaline that came with revealing the truth. He knew that hitting the numbers might bridge the gap. Victor took the papers, his brows slightly furrowing as he scanned the testimonials. Impressive. But I still don't see how this validates your claim that this proposal deserves my attention. Jack's mind raced, strategizing his next move, weighing options like pieces on a chessboard. Because the students are our greatest asset. Ignoring their needs is detrimental to the school's future. When they succeed, the institution succeeds. He realized, with a dawning clarity, that each moment was a chance to redefine himself, not just as a janitor but as an advocate, a visionary awakening latent potential. For the first time, Jack noticed Victor fidget slightly, his confidence rattled by the undeniable logic gripped with passionate urgency that Jack had delivered. If you'd only lend your ear to their voices, you might discover the real state of affairs, Jack continued, attacking each word with precision. Suddenly, the door creaked open, and a technician entered, breaking the charged atmosphere. "Excuse me, are you all ready to begin the presentation?" The technician looked mildly confused at the intensity of the conversation. In that moment, Jack saw a flicker of resolve in Victor's eyes, a shift, something akin to reconsideration. Could it be that he was really beginning to listen? Jack steeled himself for the acknowledgement he so desperately needed. "Let me just say," Victor finally stated, as if stalling, "this change you speak of requires more than just passion, it demands a grounded plan." Jack recognized the frailty within that statement, the reluctance tethered to acknowledgement. Could it be an opening? Then together, let us build that plan, Jack ventured, his heart racing as hope flooded his veins. "I'm ready to put in the work." As Victor opened his mouth to respond, Jack held his breath. For the first time, he had seen past the dismissiveness and identified a threshold they might cross together. But would their collaborative journey ignite or extinguish under Victor's scrutiny? Jack's pulse quickened again, now with anticipation laced with apprehension. What unexpected alliances might arise from this moment, and what hurdles still lay hidden beyond Victor's guarded facade? This was just the inception of a much larger battle, one where he dared to confront not just an individual but an entire culture. Jack felt the full weight of his proposal pressing against him as Victor finally shifted in his chair, his brow furrowing beneath the warehouse of power he often exuded. That small movement sparked a flicker of hope in Jack, but it was quickly doused by the reality that Victor's skepticism ran deep. Everything had been laid out before him, yet here they stood at a precipice, where frustration and tentative hope collided contortedly. "I need more than your enthusiasm, Jack," Victor finally stated, his tone somewhat softened yet laced with an underlying authority. "You must present a structured plan to implement this change. Show me details, benchmarks, and how our resources will be allocated effectively." Jack's heart thudded against his chest. He had anticipated resistance, but this was a combination of challenge and opportunity. The spark of a burning ambition ignited inside him, and he could almost hear the euphoric rallying cries of his own thoughts. He needed a strategy. A plan that would both convince Victor and leave a mark that could not be ignored. This was no longer merely about proposing an initiative, it was about stepping up as a leader. "All right, I will draft a detailed proposal," Jack replied, the determination surging through each word. "I'll gather data from students, teachers, and staff to provide insights into their experiences." He could visualize it now: the charts, the testimonies, the metrics that would fortify his plan. For the first time, the machinery of his mind pivoted towards construction instead of chaos. Victor leaned forward, his gaze sharpening. "You have 1 month. If you can come back to me with a structured proposal that addresses the funding concerns without sacrificing quality, I may just be persuaded." There was almost a challenge in his tone, a dare that felt oddly liberating. "Consider it done," Jack said, his voice steady, feeling the exhilarating thrum of adrenaline pulsate through his veins. But beneath it all lurked the creeping fear of failure. What if he couldn't deliver? What if Victor was not swayed, despite the depth of his data? Such thoughts flitted for moments but, propelled by an iron will, Jack pushed them aside. This was his moment to cultivate resilience in the face of deeply ingrained resistance. As Jack exited the room, his mind raced with possibilities. He felt the crushing pressure of the month ahead. But he also felt different awakened. A realization washed over him like a cleansing tide. He wasn't just a janitor fighting an uphill battle against institutional apathy. He was a pivotal player, a voice for those who felt unseen. In the days that followed, Jack immersed himself in the task at hand. His initial thoughts transformed into meetings with teachers and brainstorming sessions with students. He navigated through their narratives, gathering testimonials and hard data. The juxtaposition of their experiences could light a fire beneath Victor's stubborn exterior. But Jack soon discovered something challenging within this process, a delicate moral dilemma. Each story he heard echoed the struggles of a generation stifled, but it also revealed his own past reminders of compromise and acceptance that he'd long fought to escape. Would his desire for change put him in the spotlight, exposing him to backlash if he initiated conflict? He wrestled with this inner turmoil. Was he ready to face the ramifications of challenging an entrenched hierarchy? As he pieced together the elements of his comprehensive plan, Jack confronted a hidden truth: even the most audacious ambitions could carry the architect's vulnerability. The day drew closer, and every moment became a countdown to revelation, where he either fortified or dismantled Victor's defenses. But the stakes were higher than just a proposal. This was about forging his identity as someone who no longer stood in the shadows. With each argument he constructed, he uncovered hidden strengths. Jack was no longer merely seeking approval, he was crafting a legacy of change. As he sat at his cluttered desk, reviewing his notes one last time, a sudden grim realization hit him. What if Victor was prepared to dismiss the proposal outright, rejecting his efforts without examination? Would all he built collapse like a house of cards? He took a deep breath, readying himself to face the confrontation lurking on the horizon. The time had come for true reckoning, and he knew he would have to step into the fire not just for himself, but for everyone who needed their voices to be heard. Embracing unease, he understood that this was the chapter where everything could change. Did he have the fortitude to advocate for those expectations that had begun to rise? Would Victor's indifference melt away like frost in sunlight, or would it solidify into an immovable barrier, stifling his ambitions yet again? The answer lay just ahead, waiting to unfold. The days slipped by in a blur, each one layered with increasing pressure and anticipation. Jack discovered not just the necessity of gathering data, but the art of negotiation, the skill of articulating a vision that felt both personal and transformative. With each meeting, he entered a space filled with humble stories and frustrations, yet amidst that tapestry of experiences, he found a common thread: resilience. At the heart of it all was a realization that had struck him late one night, as he scribbled notes in the dim light of his desk. Change wasn't just purely about statistics or strategic plans. It was about connections between individuals and their experiences, between the proposals he crafted and the lives they influenced. He wasn't merely assembling facts, he was becoming a conduit for voices that had previously gone unheard. Each story he collected nudged him closer to understanding the weight of responsibility he was accepting, yet, anxiety clawed at him relentlessly. As the deadline loomed, moments of doubt would seize him, whispering threats that he wasn't equipped, that he was foolish for believing he could push against such institutional walls. He had witnessed firsthand the futility that accompanied challenges. It surrounded him like fog, oppressive and suffocating. Could he escape the harsh realities of failure? Amid his tumultuous internal landscape, he sought guidance from fellow staff members. Each conversation unveiled a wellspring of insights, reshaping his plan with nuances he hadn't foreseen. One teacher, Ms. Allen, recounted a dream she had for her students, where they could explore interests beyond the curriculum. Imagine the spark in their eyes if they knew they could be more than just numbers in exams, she said. her passion igniting something within him. Jack realized that an essential component of his proposal was not just the academic benefits, but how student engagement could cultivate a renewed culture within the institution. It struck him engagement wasn't just a metric, it was a revolution. His heart raced as thoughts collided in his mind, constructing a narrative he could sell, one that intertwined measurable outcomes with the emotional well-being of students, yet something still gnawed at him, the sense that this was more than a professional obligation, it was personal. He began revisiting his own narratives, the days he'd felt lost and invisible, the longing for affirmation. Was he fighting for students' futures, or was this also an attempt to rewrite his own story? This tension flooded him with courage, pushing him to pivot from self-preservation to daringly confronting potential failure. With an urgency that felt almost palpable, he delved deeper into the proposal's skeleton. The days of merely collecting data morphed into meticulously crafting a narrative that encompassed concern, hope, and change. Each section he wrote demanded clarity, each point he crafted called for conviction. He embraced this pressure, recognizing that the stakes weren't solely about getting Victor to see his vision but about seizing the opportunity to redefine his place in this system. As the deadline approached, Jack's desk became a battlefield strewn with plans, charts, and expressive feedback, the war room where his identity and ambitions collided. He harnessed moments of doubt, channeling them into fuel. For every tentative voice that echoed in his mind, he wrestled back with memories that fortified his resolve. Finally, the day arrived. With his proposal printed and organized, Jack stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie. He noted the determination etched across his face. It was a reflection of a man transformed. Now, he felt ready to face Victor not as a janitor burdened by implicit limitations, but as an advocate unwavering in purpose. With the proposal nestled beneath his arm, he couldn't shake the feeling of all the eyes he'd be representing. Would Victor's notorious skepticism be the end of it, or could Jack strike a chord that rippled through the foundations of resistance? As he walked down the hallway toward Victor's office, the labyrinth of his emotions swirled ominously, doubt and excitement clashed fiercely. But one thing he knew, the moment of confrontation was not just aimed at Victor. It was a reckoning with himself, a decisive step toward fully embracing his place in this fight for change. What awaited him behind that door? Would he find the validation he so desperately sought, or another insurmountable barrier to shatter? Jack steeled himself, realizing this was the moment his life could pivot in a different direction. He took a deep breath and pushed open the door. The room was a stark contrast to the bustling hallways outside. Soft light filtered through thick curtains, highlighting a polished wooden desk strewn with papers that spoke of authority and permanence. Victor sat behind it, an imposing figure clad in sharp attire that seemed to radiate skepticism. Jack's heart raced, but he stepped forward, grounding himself in the knowledge that he had arrived at this moment not as an outsider seeking approval, but as an agent of change. Jack, Victor greeted him with a raised eyebrow, his tone a mix of surprise and thinly veiled condescension. "I didn't expect to see you here. What's so pressing that it couldn't wait until tomorrow?" Jack wasted no time. He laid the proposal on the desk, his hands steady despite the simmering anxiety churning within him. "I have a vision for our students, Victor. A proposal designed not just to improve performance metrics, but to ignite their passion for learning." Victor arched an eyebrow, feigning interest as he leaned back in his chair. "Interesting approach, but you know the reality of our constraints. Numbers drive decisions here." Jack felt the weight of the room shift, the air thick with unspoken critique. But what if the numbers could change? If we genuinely foster engagement and connection, wouldn't that reflect positively on our outcomes? Victor's expression hardened, reflecting years of entrenched dogma. Engagement is a nice word, Jack, but it doesn't translate to funding. History shows what's worth investing in, and right now, your vision isn't among them. It was as if a dam had broken within Jack. The flood of feelings he had contained surged forth. "That's the problem, Victor. We're measuring success with outdated tools. Students aren't just data points, they're human beings with dreams. If we continue to ignore their voices, we're not just failing them, we're failing ourselves." The gravity of his words hung in the air, but Jack saw Victor's dismissive smirk return, like a curtain drawn back after a bright revelation. You see, Jack, your passion is commendable. But passion doesn't pay the bills or fill the seats. You must understand that in this institution, idealism is often a naive fantasy. Jack felt the ground beneath him shift as the walls threatened to close in. This wasn't just about the proposal, it was a reckoning with the very beliefs he had clung to. But what I'm suggesting isn't idealism, it's strategic. Engaged students perform better. Their success isn't just good for their futures, but it's also good for all of us. Victor's eyes narrowed, interest piqued slightly by Jack's fervor. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a simple rejection after all. Yet, as if to reassert dominance, he leaned forward, examining Jack with a calculating gaze, as if he were gauging the worth of a mere janitor's words. Tell me, Jack. What makes you think you have the authority to challenge this system? What gives you the right? This was at the confrontation he'd both feared and anticipated. Jack's mind raced, wrestling with the moments of self-doubt that crept in as Victor positioned himself as the guardian of the status quo. But something within him shifted again. I may not have the title or position, but I understand the struggles of our students. I see their potential beyond the spreadsheets, and I know it's time for someone to advocate for them. Victor paused, his demeanor momentarily faltering. Was that uncertainty flickering beneath his confident facade? Jack seized the opportunity, feeling the tide of control shift, a struggle for influence and recognition unfolding in the dim light of the office. Maybe, Jack continued, emboldened, what the institution truly needs is a fresh perspective. This notion swelled within him, buoyed not only by his experiences but by the voices of those he represented. This proposal isn't just a collection of data, it's a beacon of hope. Are you willing to acknowledge the possibility of change? Victor's response was unreadable, a moment stretching indefinitely as he evaluated whether to dismiss Jack entirely or engage in a dialogue for the first time. But then, Jack caught sight of something in Victor's eyes, curiosity laced with a hint of intrigue. Could it be that Jack had struck a chord? The realization that Jack was pressing against more than institutional resistance dissolved into the ever-shifting dynamics of their confrontation. Jack could sense he was on the precipice of something monumental, but what would Victor ultimately choose, a life governed by the tried and true or the risky investment in the untested? In that charged moment, the stakes rose, and Jack felt his own determination crystallize. As Victor opened his mouth to speak, the weight of history hung in the air, a wall of tradition ready to either crack or solidify further. With everything on the line, Jack prepared to navigate not just this meeting but the new path his life had begun to forge. What would Victor decide when faced with the echo of accountability and the promise of transformation? Victor's eyes narrowed as he assessed Jack, the tension palpable between them. For a moment, time seemed to pause, allowing Jack to grasp the magnitude of his own defiance. He wasn't merely pitching a proposal, he was standing at the intersection of his beliefs and the stark reality of bureaucracy. Underlying threats loomed, but the fear that had previously paralyzed him transformed into a steely resolve. Your concern about numbers is valid, Victor, Jack pressed on, voice steady despite the storm within. But it's time the institution invested in the human experience. Isn't that worth exploring? A noble idea, Victor replied, but the mockery slipped back into his tone. The real world has its own set of rules, Jack, and you're just beginning to learn them. This barb grazed Jack's self-assurance but renewed his inner fire. It ignited a realization: he had lived his entire life hidden in the shadows of what others deemed possible. Maybe some rules need to be rewritten, he said, finding new strength in the thought. We owe it to our students to try. Victor's brows knitted together as he pondered Jack's boldness. That glimmer of curiosity Jack had seen only moments ago seemed to flicker once more, hinting that their respective worlds weren't as disparate as he once believed. Jack took a deep breath, summoning the courage to push further. What if, he began, we implemented a pilot program? Give me 6 months to showcase my approach. A small group of students, minimal investment. Victor chuckled, the sound a mix of disbelief and intrigue. A pilot? Is that your grand strategy? A half-baked idea to justify your passion? Jack felt a surge of indignation flood through him. Did Victor see him as merely an idealist? It's not about justifying my passion, it's about demonstrating its impact. What is so wrong with a willingness to innovate? Wouldn't you say that's what leadership demands? Victor hesitated, the challenge hanging in the air. It took only a moment for Jack to realize that they were engaged in a game of wits, where both risked revealing more about themselves than they intended. Jack was no longer just a janitor challenging the establishment, he was a voice for change, and Victor needed to recognize this. For the first time, Jack observed a flicker of uncertainty on Victor's face, moments of probability fracturing through the armor of his authority. What would it take for you to truly believe in this, Jack? What metrics or outcomes would you need to feel vindicated? The question unsettled Jack. It forced him to confront his own benchmarks, not just the measurable success of students but the intangible rewards of fostering a vibrant educational ethos. I need to see them believe in themselves, he replied slowly, and ultimately, I want to see them thrive not just academically, but in their lives beyond these walls. Victor leaned back, sifting through Jack's words like the carefully organized papers on his desk. Jack's heart raced as his resolve solidified. Perhaps he was moving in the right direction. Perhaps there was room for dialogue. Their discussion steered into uncharted territory, the edges of possibility flaring brightly against the dim hum of routine. But Jack knew that an ultimatum could arrive at any moment, threatening to extinguish the fire they had unwittingly ignited. Victor's path was predictability, Jack's was inherent risk. As the tension between them hovered, Jack's internal dialogue churned. Doubt wrestled fervently against hope. Could he truly influence a man like Victor? Or was he simply igniting a flame that would only burn him in the end? All right, Victor said finally, his expression now disarming. Let us entertain your idea. But understand this, if you fail, the consequences will rest on your shoulders alone. Every fiber of Jack's being surged with adrenaline. He nodded, knowing the weight of the challenge he accepted. Not just his reputation, but the futures of the students he dared to advocate for rested within the fragile space of Victor's approval, but beneath that euphoria stirred a whirlwind of uncertainty. Could he really navigate the complexities of an institutional landscape while staying true to his vision? The road ahead promised turbulence, and as Jack left Victor's office, he sensed he was stepping into a transformative journey that would test not only his courage but the very core of who he had always been. What fresh obstacles awaited him now? The game had changed, but it opened the door to questions he had yet to answer. What strategies lay ahead to ensure they wouldn't become a lost opportunity, mere remnants of a struggling dream? Jack's transformation was no longer a distant hope, it had taken shape. With Victor's tentative approval echoing in his mind, he sprinted down the hall toward freedom, the sun pouring through the windows, illuminating the path ahead. The proposal had been just a mere outline before, but now it pulsed with potential, loaded with emotion and responsibility. Energized by this new opportunity, he dove deep into crafting the pilot program. Days whirled into weeks, filled with meetings, data gathering, and the kind of exhilarating brainstorming sessions that fueled his vision. Jack could feel himself blossoming into a leader as he discovered the importance of collaboration, intertwining the voices of students with his own. He engaged every skeptic he encountered, knowing the power of collective narratives. Students, once indifferent, found themselves inspired by his passion. Conversations transformed mundane spaces into vibrant discussions about their needs and aspirations. In this new role, he became a bridge between the administration and the student body. Each piece of data he collected weighed on his shoulders like a prized trophy, illuminating stories of resilience, ambition, and hope. As the pilot program developed, Jack felt less like a janitor and more like an advocate, one who was articulating the truths that had long been silenced. With the clock ticking down to launch day, Jack's resolve was tested at every turn. He encountered backlash from some faculty members resistant to change, and Victor's scrutiny loomed heavily over the project. Yet, with each challenge, Jack countered self-doubt with purpose. Every late night spent drafting the proposal felt justified as he envisioned students finding their voices, their joy rekindled in the learning process, and then came the day of the pilot program's presentation. Jack stood before an audience in the same conference room where he had first confronted Victor. This time, he wasn't hemmed in by uncertainty. Instead, he projected confidence, driven by his righteous cause. He presented his findings with clarity, weaving testimonials into a tapestry of shared experience that commanded attention. It was as if the room transformed with each story he told. Students were no longer numbers, but individuals bursting with potential. Jack concluded with a bold vision, a campus culture reimagined, students not only learning but thriving, engaged in a community where their opinions shaped the environment. As he finished, the silence in the room was palpable. For the first time, he saw Victor's familiar skepticism soften. The billionaire's eyes flickered with a hint of curiosity instead of derision. Days later, there was a knock at Jack's office. Victor stood on the threshold, a shadow of his former aloofness, his demeanor unreadable. "I've been reviewing the pilot's early results," he admitted, leaning against the doorframe. "It's impressive." The confirmation rang like a victory bell, flooding Jack with a mixture of disbelief and joy. "Not just impressive, this could reshape our engagement metrics," Victor continued, surprise evident in his voice. "I underestimated your resolve, Jack. You've opened a dialogue we desperately needed." Each word resonated, fueling Jack's belief in himself and his mission. No longer was his title an anchor, it was a passport to influence. Jack had achieved something profound. He was no longer a spectator in his life. He had stepped into the arena, his voice echoing within the institutional walls, changing minds and hearts. He felt solid confidence and determination coursing through him. He had not only gained recognition but had also transformed the narrative around the value of student engagement. The celebration of the pilot program's success ignited a sense of profound personal achievement, a validation of every struggle he'd endured. Jack stood with pride amongst students who once felt unseen. They had rallied around their voice. His journey concluded not just in the triumph of a proposal but in the deeper understanding of his worth. Jack had conquered self-doubt, built collaborative bridges, and advocated for fundamental change. The storm he navigated was daunting, yet he emerged fortified. The janitor's uniform, regarded as an emblem of service, had morphed into a symbol of empowerment, demonstrating that anyone, regardless of title, could profoundly impact the ecosystem around them. As Jack reflected on all that had transpired, it was clear, the walls of the old world were crumbling, replaced by mutual respect and collaboration. Filled with a sense of closure, he knew he had fulfilled his potential. He was an agent of meaningful change, and he wore that transformation as proudly as any suit. Now, listeners, this is your moment. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like right away to feed the algorithm and keep this boat floating. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jack's transformation. Your voice matters just as much. And share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because sometimes, inspiration is just what someone needs to take that first step. Don't wait even one more second. Show your support and be part of this journey.